The alarm clock buzzed at 6:30 a.m. sharp. Just like every other Tuesday morning, Damon rolled out of bed and stretched, already thinking about the physics test next week. He had been studying late into the night, going over electromagnetic wave equations until his eyes burned. But that was nothing new for him. Ever since middle school, Damon had been the kid who actually enjoyed math and science while his friends groaned about homework. His mom was already in the kitchen when he came downstairs, packing his lunch with the same care she had every day since kindergarten. She worked 2 jobs to keep him in this good school district, and Damon never forgot that. Every A on his report card was for her as much as himself. "You got everything ready for that presentation today?" she asked, not looking up from the sandwich she was making. "Yeah, Mom. It's just a regular class day, though." Damon grabbed his backpack and checked his phone. He had gotten up early to review his notes one more time before school. His physics teacher, Mr. Peterson, had a reputation for asking tough questions, and Damon wanted to be ready. The bus ride to Riverside High was the same as always. Damon sat near the front with his earbuds in, reviewing formulas on his phone. He had learned early on that the back of the bus was too loud for studying, and he had studying to do. His friends thought he was crazy for taking advanced physics as a junior, but Damon loved the challenge. He was already thinking about engineering programs at good colleges. When the bus pulled up to school, Damon could see the familiar red brick building with its perfectly trimmed hedges. Riverside High looked like something from a movie about successful suburban schools. The parking lot was full of cars that cost more than his mom made in 6 months, but Damon had stopped noticing stuff like that a long time ago. He was here for one reason: to get the best education possible. Walking through the hallways, Damon nodded to classmates and checked his locker. His textbooks were organized perfectly, just like his notes. Organization was everything when you were juggling advanced classes, part-time work at the local grocery store, and helping your mom with bills. There was no room for mistakes or forgotten assignments. The first period bell rang and Damon made his way to AP Physics. The classroom was on the 3rd floor and he always took the stairs 2 at a time. He liked being one of the first students there. It gave him a chance to set up his materials and maybe ask Mr. Peterson any questions from the homework. But when Damon walked into the classroom 15 minutes early, something felt different. Mr. Peterson was at his desk grading papers and he looked up when Damon entered. There was something in the teacher's expression that Damon couldn't quite read. Not exactly unfriendly, but not welcoming either. "Morning, Mr. Peterson," Damon said, walking to his usual seat in the 3rd row. "I had a question about problem number 12 from last night." Mr. Peterson barely looked up from his papers. "We'll cover any questions during class time." Damon felt a small knot form in his stomach. Usually, Mr. Peterson was happy to help students who came in early. The man had taught at Riverside for over 20 years and had a reputation for being tough but fair. At least that's what Damon had heard from other students. More classmates started filtering in as the minutes ticked by. Ashley and Brandon, who sat near Damon, were talking about some party over the weekend. Jessica was cramming for a history test. Everything seemed normal, but Damon couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The 2nd bell rang and Mr. Peterson stood up to start class. He was a tall man with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look exactly like what people expected a physics teacher to look like. His voice carried easily across the room when he spoke. "All right, everyone. Books closed. We're starting with a pop quiz on electromagnetic waves." A collective groan went up from the class, but Damon felt confident. He had studied this material thoroughly. While other students frantically flipped through their notes, Damon sat calmly with his hands folded. He knew this stuff inside and out. Mr. Peterson handed out the quiz sheets, walking between the rows of desks. When he got to Damon's desk, he paused for just a moment longer than necessary. Damon looked up and met his teacher's eyes, but Mr. Peterson's expression was unreadable. The quiz had 5 questions, all about concepts they had covered the previous week. Damon worked through them methodically, showing all his work like Mr. Peterson had taught them. He finished with time to spare and double-checked his answers. Everything looked good. As students finished and turned in their papers, Mr. Peterson collected them without comment. But Damon noticed that when the teacher took his quiz, there was that same odd pause. Like he was surprised Damon had finished so quickly, or maybe surprised by something else entirely. "We'll review these tomorrow." Mr. Peterson announced. Today we're moving on to wave interference patterns. Damon pulled out his notebook and prepared to take notes. This was one of his favorite topics in physics. The way waves could either amplify or cancel each other out when they met was fascinating to him. He had even done some extra reading about it online. But as Mr. Peterson began the lesson, Damon started to notice small things. When other students asked questions, the teacher answered patiently and thoroughly. When Damon raised his hand to ask about a specific formula, Mr. Peterson's response was short and dismissive. "That's covered in your textbook," was all he said before moving on. Damon felt his cheeks get warm. He knew it was in the textbook, but he wanted to understand the deeper concept behind it. That's what good students did, right? They asked questions that went beyond just memorizing formulas. The rest of the class period continued with Damon feeling more and more uncomfortable. It wasn't anything he could point to specifically. Mr. Peterson wasn't being mean or obviously unfair. But there was definitely something different about how he was treating Damon compared to the other students. When the bell finally rang, Damon packed up his things slowly. Maybe he was just imagining things. Maybe Mr. Peterson was having a bad day, or maybe Damon was being too sensitive. He had worked too hard to get into advanced classes to start seeing problems that weren't there. As he walked to his next class, Damon tried to push the weird feeling aside. He had chemistry next, then English, then lunch. Just a normal Tuesday at Riverside High. But something in the back of his mind kept nagging at him, telling him that this morning in physics class was just the beginning of something bigger. 2 weeks had passed since that strange morning in physics class, and things hadn't gotten any better. If anything, they were getting worse. Damon tried to tell himself he was overthinking it, but the pattern was becoming too obvious to ignore. Today was different, though. Today, Mr. Peterson was handing back the quiz from last week, and Damon was curious to see how he had done. He had felt confident about his answers, and physics was his strongest subject. His grade point average depended on maintaining his A in this class. Quiz results, Mr. Peterson announced, walking around the classroom with a stack of papers. Some of you clearly need to study harder. Damon watched as his classmates received their papers. Ashley got hers back with a big red B+ at the top and smiled. Brandon looked less happy with his C. When Mr. Peterson reached Damon's desk, he placed the paper face down without making eye contact. Damon flipped it over and felt his stomach drop. There was a big red D+ at the top of the page. A D+? That was impossible. He looked through his answers, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. His work was neat and organized. His formulas were correct, and his final answers matched what he had double-checked that day. But there were red marks everywhere. Not just wrong answers, but comments like unclear reasoning and insufficient explanation written in Mr. Peterson's handwriting. Damon looked at the problem he was most confident about, question 3 about wave frequency. His answer was mathematically correct, but Mr. Peterson had marked it wrong anyway. Damon raised his hand. "Mr. Peterson, I think there might be a mistake on my quiz." The teacher looked over with that same unreadable expression. "What kind of mistake?" "Well, on question 3 my answer is right, but it's marked wrong. And I showed all my work like you asked." Mr. Peterson walked over to Damon's desk and looked at the paper. The whole class was watching now, which made Damon feel even more uncomfortable. He hated being the center of attention, especially for something like this. "Your work is sloppy," Mr. Peterson said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I can barely read your handwriting, and your explanations don't show real understanding of the concepts." Damon felt his face getting hot. His handwriting was actually quite neat, and he had explained each step clearly. He looked around the classroom and caught Ashley's eye. She looked confused and a little concerned. Her quiz had handwriting that was definitely messier than his, but she hadn't gotten marked down for it. "But sir, the math is correct," Damon said quietly, hoping to avoid making a bigger scene. "Math is only part of physics," Mr. Peterson replied. "Understanding the deeper concepts is what separates good students from those who are just memorizing formulas." The word stung because Damon knew he understood the concepts better than most students in the class. He had read ahead in the textbook and even watched college-level physics videos online. But arguing with the teacher in front of everyone would only make things worse. The rest of the class period was torture. Mr. Peterson moved on to a new topic about sound waves, and Damon tried to focus on taking notes. But his mind kept going back to that D+ and the unfair comments written all over his quiz. He had never gotten a grade that low in a science class ever. When other students asked questions during the lesson, Mr. Peterson answered them with patience and detailed explanations. When Damon raised his hand to ask about the relationship between frequency and wavelength, the teacher barely glanced at him. "We covered that last week. Pay attention to your notes." But they hadn't covered that specific relationship last week. Damon knew because he had been taking careful notes every day. He wanted to point this out, but he could feel the other students looking at him with a mixture of pity and awkwardness. Nobody liked watching someone get picked on, even if they didn't understand why it was happening. After class, Damon stayed behind to speak with Mr. Peterson privately. Maybe there had been some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe if he approached this calmly and respectfully, they could work it out. "Mr. Peterson, could I talk to you about my quiz grade?" The teacher was erasing the whiteboard and didn't turn around. "What about it?" "I really think there might be some errors in the grading. I've been getting A's in all my other science classes, and I studied really hard for this quiz." Mr. Peterson finally turned around, and his expression was not friendly. "Are you suggesting I don't know how to grade my own tests?" "No, sir, not at all. I just think maybe we could review the answers together. I want to understand where I went wrong so I can do better next time. What you need to understand is that this is an advanced class. Not everyone is cut out for this level of work. Maybe you should consider transferring to regular physics." Damon felt like he had been punched in the stomach. He had worked incredibly hard to get into advanced classes. His mom had been so proud when he qualified for the AP program. The suggestion that he didn't belong here was devastating. "I think I can handle the work, sir. My grades in my other classes are really good. Other classes aren't my concern. What I see in my classroom is a student who's struggling to keep up and making excuses instead of working harder." Damon wanted to argue, wanted to point out that he studied more than almost anyone else in the class. But something in Mr. Peterson's tone told him that no amount of reasoning would change the teacher's mind. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't really about his quiz answers or his study habits. "I'll try harder," Damon said quietly, because he didn't know what else to say. "See that you do." Walking to lunch, Damon felt completely deflated. He had always been the kind of student teachers liked. He was polite, hardworking, and genuinely interested in learning. He helped other students when they asked and never caused problems in class. So why was Mr. Peterson treating him like he was some kind of troublemaker? At lunch, his friends could tell something was wrong. Kevin, who was in regular physics, asked about the advanced class. "How's Peterson treating you? I heard he's pretty tough." "Yeah, he's tough," Damon said, not wanting to get into the whole story. How could he explain that he was pretty sure his teacher was treating him unfairly without sounding like he was making excuses? "But you're smart enough for that class for sure," added his friend Tyler. "You helped me pass chemistry last year." Damon appreciated the support, but it made him feel even worse. His friends believed in him, his other teachers believed in him, and his mom believed in him. So why didn't Mr. Peterson? That afternoon, Damon went home and immediately started studying for the next physics test. If Mr. Peterson wanted to see hard work, he would show him hard work. He would study until he knew every formula, every concept, and every possible application. He would prove that he belonged in that classroom. But deep down, a small voice in his head was wondering if hard work would be enough. What if the problem wasn't his effort or his ability? What if the problem was something he couldn't study his way out of? Damon pushed that thought away and opened his textbook. He had too much to lose to give up now. Whatever was going on with Mr. Peterson, he would find a way to handle it. He had to. 3 more weeks had passed, and the situation in Mr. Peterson's physics class had gotten much worse. What started as subtle unfairness had become obvious to everyone in the room. Damon had studied harder than ever before, staying up until midnight every night reviewing formulas and concepts. He had even bought extra practice books with his own money from his grocery store job. None of it seemed to matter. The test grades kept coming back with C's and D's, even though Damon knew his answers were correct. His homework assignments were marked down for reasons that made no sense. When he solved problems on the whiteboard, Mr. Peterson would find fault with his methods even when they led to the right answer. Today was going to be different, though. Today, Mr. Peterson was announcing the groups for the semester-long final project. This project was worth 30% of their grade, and Damon had been hoping to partner with some of the stronger students in the class. Working with serious students would give him a chance to prove himself and maybe improve his overall grade. "All right, everyone. Mr. Peterson said, holding a clipboard with the group assignments. I've put you into teams of 4 based on your performance in class so far. These groups are final, so don't ask me to change them. Damon listened carefully as Mr. Peterson read off the groups. The first group had Ashley, Brandon, and 2 other students who were getting A's in the class. They were assigned to research quantum mechanics applications. The second group also had strong students and got electromagnetic field theory. Group after group was announced, and Damon noticed a pattern. All the students who were doing well in class were being grouped together. The B students were with other B students, and then Mr. Peterson got to the last group. Group 6 will be Damon, Chris, Maya, and Jordan. You'll be researching basic wave properties. Damon felt his heart sink. Chris barely showed up to class and usually slept when he did. Maya was sweet but struggled with even simple math problems. Jordan was more interested in texting than physics, and their topic was basic wave properties, something they had covered in the first month of class. Meanwhile, the advanced groups got topics like advanced particle physics and modern applications of Einstein's theories. It was clear that Mr. Peterson expected very little from Damon's group. After class, Damon approached the teacher's desk one more time. He had to try. Mr. Peterson, I was wondering if I could possibly join one of the other groups. I've been doing a lot of extra studying, and I think I could contribute to a more advanced topic. Mr. Peterson didn't even look up from his grade book. The groups are set based on ability levels. You're where you need to be. But sir, I really think I could handle more challenging material. Maybe if you looked at my extra credit work. What extra credit work? Damon pulled out a folder from his backpack. Over the past month, he had been doing additional physics problems from college textbooks, hoping to prove his understanding of advanced concepts. He had solved problems about relativity, quantum mechanics, and electromagnetic theory that went way beyond what they were covering in class. Mr. Peterson took the folder and flipped through it quickly, barely looking at the work. This isn't what we're studying in class. If you spent more time focusing on the actual curriculum instead of showing off, maybe your grades would improve. The words hit Damon like a slap. Showing off? He had been desperately trying to prove that he understood the material, not showing off, and the problems he had solved were definitely more advanced than what most of his classmates could handle. I just want to make sure I'm being challenged appropriately, Damon said, trying to keep his voice steady. Mr. Peterson finally looked up and his expression was cold. Let me be very clear about something. This is an advanced placement class designed for students who can handle college-level work. Some students thrive in this environment and others struggle to keep up. There's no shame in admitting when you're in over your head. But I'm not in over my head. I understand the material. Your grades suggest otherwise. My grades aren't reflecting my understanding because... Damon stopped himself. He had been about to say because you're grading me unfairly, but he knew that would only make things worse. Because what? Mr. Peterson asked, raising an eyebrow. Because I need to study harder. Damon finished quietly. Exactly. Now I suggest you focus on doing well with your assigned group, instead of worrying about what other students are doing. Walking out of the classroom, Damon felt more frustrated than ever. He pulled out his phone to text his mom that he'd be late getting home because he needed to go to the library. As he was typing, he accidentally hit the voice memo app instead of messages. Hey Siri, text Mom, he said, but realized his mistake when he saw the recording screen pop up. He was about to cancel it when he heard voices behind him in the hallway. It was Mr. Peterson talking to another teacher, Mr. Williams from the math department. Damon wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices carried in the empty hallway. I don't know why the administration keeps pushing these diversity initiatives, Mr. Peterson was saying. We're supposed to maintain academic standards. What do you mean? Mr. Williams asked. I've got this one student who clearly doesn't belong in AP Physics. But because of his background, everyone expects me to lower my standards to help him succeed. It's not fair to the other students who actually earned their place in advanced classes. Damon froze. Were they talking about him? His background? What did that mean? That's a tough situation, Mr. Williams replied. But maybe the kid just needs more support. Some students need to learn that not everything is going to be handed to them. Hard work means accepting your limitations and finding where you actually fit. Damon's hands were shaking as he realized his phone was still recording. He quickly stopped the recording and walked quickly toward the exit, his mind racing. The conversation he had just heard confirmed what he had been trying not to believe for weeks. This wasn't about his abilities or his study habits. This was about something else entirely. Mr. Peterson had already decided that Damon didn't belong in his classroom, and nothing Damon could do would change that decision. For the first time since this whole situation started, Damon felt angry instead of just confused and hurt. He had worked incredibly hard to get into advanced classes. He had sacrificed social activities and sleep to maintain his grades. He had earned his spot in AP Physics just like every other student, but apparently some people didn't see it that way. Walking to the bus stop, Damon made a decision. He wasn't going to keep pretending this was his fault. He wasn't going to keep trying harder and harder while being graded unfairly. Something needed to change, and if Mr. Peterson wasn't going to treat him fairly, then Damon would have to find another way to handle this situation. He looked down at his phone and saw the voice memo from a few minutes ago. Without really thinking about it, he had recorded the most important conversation of his high school career. Now he had to figure out what to do with it. The bus ride home was quiet, but Damon's mind was anything but calm. For weeks he had been questioning himself, wondering if maybe he really wasn't smart enough for advanced physics. Now he knew the truth. It was much more complicated and much more unfair than he had imagined, but he also knew he wasn't going to just accept it anymore. Damon spent the entire weekend thinking about that. Recording on his phone, he must have listened to it 50 times, each time feeling a mixture of anger and vindication. Finally, he had proof that his suspicions were correct. Mr. Peterson's treatment of him had nothing to do with his academic abilities, but having proof and knowing what to do with it were two different things. Damon had never been the type to cause drama or make waves. He preferred to solve problems quietly and work hard until things got better. This situation was different, though. Working harder wasn't going to fix a teacher who had already made up his mind. Monday morning came too quickly. Damon sat on the bus, his phone in his pocket, feeling heavier than usual. He had made a decision over the weekend, but he wasn't sure he had the courage to go through with it. What if nobody believed him? What if making a big deal out of this just made everything worse? First period was chemistry, and Damon tried to focus on the lesson about molecular structures, but his mind kept drifting to third period physics. Today was the day they were supposed to start working on their group projects, which meant another reminder of how Mr. Peterson had deliberately put him with the struggling students. When third period finally arrived, Damon walked into the physics classroom with a different feeling than usual. Instead of the anxiety and dread he had been experiencing for weeks, he felt oddly calm. Maybe it was because he finally understood what he was dealing with, or maybe it was because he had a plan. "Good morning, class," Mr. Peterson said as the bell rang. "Today we're going to spend time with your project groups. I want to see preliminary research plans by the end of the period." The class began rearranging themselves into their assigned groups. Damon watched as the advanced groups immediately started discussing complex physics concepts and dividing up research responsibilities. Ashley's group was already talking about quantum entanglement and particle wave duality. Meanwhile, Damon's group was having a very different conversation. "So we're supposed to research wave properties?" Maya asked, looking confused. "Like what waves do?" "I guess," Chris mumbled. "Sounds boring." Jordan wasn't even pretending to pay attention. He was playing a game on his phone under his desk. Damon realized this was the perfect opportunity to put his plan into action. He pulled out his phone and opened the voice memo app, setting it to record. Then he addressed his group in a voice loud enough for nearby students to hear. "Actually, wave properties are really fascinating," he said. "There are some incredible applications in modern technology. Maybe we could research how wave interference is used in noise-canceling headphones, or how electromagnetic waves work in wireless communication." "That sounds way too hard," Chris said immediately. "Yeah, let's just do something simple." Maya agreed. Damon had expected this response. "Well, what if I do most of the research and you guys help with the presentation? I actually find this stuff really interesting." This got Mr. Peterson's attention. The teacher walked over to their group with a disapproving expression. "Is there a problem here?" Mr. Peterson asked. "No problem," Damon replied calmly. "I was just suggesting some research directions for our project." "And what directions were those?" Damon repeated his suggestions about wave interference and electromagnetic applications. As he spoke, he noticed that students from other groups were starting to listen. His voice was clear and confident, and his ideas were genuinely good. Mr. Peterson's response was swift and loud. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. You're trying to overcomplicate a simple assignment. Your group was given basic wave properties to research because that's the appropriate level for your abilities. But sir, Damon said, still keeping his voice calm and respectful, I understand these concepts pretty well. I've been studying them outside of class. Understanding concepts means being able to apply them practically, not just memorizing definitions from textbooks. This was the moment Damon had been waiting for. Would you like me to demonstrate my understanding? Mr. Peterson looked annoyed. What do you mean? Well, you mentioned practical applications. What if I explained how wave interference works in noise-canceling headphones? Or I could solve some problems involving electromagnetic wave propagation. The classroom had gotten noticeably quieter. Other students were definitely listening now, sensing that something important was happening. Fine, Mr. Peterson said, clearly expecting Damon to fail. Go to the whiteboard and show us how electromagnetic waves are used in cell phone communication. Damon stood up and walked to the front of the class, his heart pounding, but his mind clear. This was his moment to prove himself, not just to Mr. Peterson, but to all his classmates who had been watching him struggle for weeks. He picked up a marker and began drawing a diagram. Cell phones use electromagnetic waves in the radio frequency range. He started, his voice steady and confident. When you make a call, your phone converts sound waves into electromagnetic signals. As he drew and explained, Damon could see the surprise on his classmates' faces. He wasn't just reciting memorized facts. He was explaining complex concepts in a way that made sense, connecting different ideas and showing how they work together. The key is how these waves travel through the atmosphere and how they're modulated to carry information. He continued, adding mathematical formulas to his diagram. The frequency determines how far the waves can travel and how much information they can carry. When he finished, the classroom was completely silent. Even Jordan had put away his phone and was staring at the whiteboard. Damon had just given a college-level explanation of electromagnetic wave communication, complete with mathematical proofs and practical applications. Mr. Peterson's face had gone through several different expressions during the presentation. Surprise, annoyance, and something that might have been embarrassment. That's adequate, the teacher said finally. But understanding one concept doesn't mean you're ready for advanced coursework. You're right, Damon replied, still standing at the front of the class. So let me ask you something. What specific concepts do you think I'm struggling with? Because I'd be happy to demonstrate my understanding of any topic we've covered this semester. This was the moment of truth. Damon was no longer being defensive or apologetic. He was directly challenging Mr. Peterson to explain exactly what academic deficiencies justified the treatment he had been receiving. Wave-particle duality, Mr. Peterson said quickly. Damon immediately began explaining the concept, including the famous double-slit experiment and its implications for quantum mechanics. Electromagnetic field theory. Again, Damon provided a clear, detailed explanation with examples. After the third topic, Mr. Peterson stopped asking. It was becoming obvious to everyone in the room that Damon understood the material better than most students in the class. Several of his classmates were taking notes on his explanations. Thank you, Damon, Mr. Peterson said, his voice tight. You can sit down now. But Damon wasn't finished. This was the moment he had been preparing for all weekend. Mr. Peterson, I have a question for you. Over the past several weeks, I've received low grades on assignments where my work was mathematically correct and my explanations were clear. I've been placed in a project group with students who are struggling, despite demonstrating strong understanding of advanced concepts. And I've been repeatedly told that I don't belong in this class, despite evidence to the contrary. The classroom was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I'm wondering if you could help me understand what specific academic standards I'm not meeting that would justify this treatment. Mr. Peterson's face was red now. That's enough. Sit down immediately. I'm just trying to understand the grading criteria, Damon continued calmly. Because based on my performance today, it seems like my understanding of the material is actually quite strong. So I'm confused about why my grades don't reflect that. Sit down now, or you'll be sent to the principal's office. Damon looked around the classroom at his fellow students, all of whom were watching this confrontation with wide eyes. Ashley looked shocked. Brandon appeared confused. Even Chris and Maya seemed to realize that something significant was happening. Actually, Damon said, reaching into his pocket for his phone, I think the principal's office might be exactly where this conversation needs to continue. For the first time all semester, Mr. Peterson looked genuinely uncertain about how to respond. The student he had been dismissing and underestimating had just demonstrated superior knowledge of the subject matter and was now calmly demanding accountability for months of unfair treatment, and everyone in the class had witnessed the entire exchange. The walk to the principal's office felt like the longest walk of Damon's life. Mr. Peterson had reluctantly agreed to accompany him after Damon calmly insisted that this situation needed to be resolved by the administration. The hallways were empty since classes were still in session, and their footsteps echoed loudly in the silence. Principal Martinez was a fair woman who had been at Riverside High for 8 years. She knew Damon as one of the school's top academic performers and had personally congratulated him when he qualified for the advanced placement program. When her secretary announced that Mr. Peterson and Damon needed to see her immediately, she cleared her schedule. "Please sit down," Principal Martinez said, gesturing to the chairs in front of her desk. "What's going on?" Damon had rehearsed this moment in his head over the weekend, but now that it was actually happening, his mouth felt dry. He looked at Mr. Peterson, who was sitting stiffly in the chair next to him, then back at the principal. "I need to report a pattern of discriminatory treatment in Mr. Peterson's physics class," Damon said quietly. Principal Martinez's eyebrows went up slightly. This was clearly not what she had expected to hear. "That's a serious accusation, Damon. Can you explain what you mean?" For the next 20 minutes, Damon carefully laid out everything that had happened over the past 2 months. The unfair grading, the dismissive comments, the inappropriate group placement, and the obvious difference in how he was treated compared to other students. He spoke calmly and factually, providing specific examples and dates. Mr. Peterson interrupted several times to dispute Damon's account, claiming that the student was simply not performing at the level required for advanced coursework. But Principal Martinez asked him to wait until Damon had finished his full explanation. "Those are serious allegations," Principal Martinez said when Damon was done. "Mr. Peterson, how do you respond to these concerns? This student is struggling in my class, and instead of working harder, he's making excuses and blaming me for his poor performance." Mr. Peterson replied, "I've been teaching for over 20 years, and I know how to assess student abilities fairly." "Actually," Damon said, reaching for his phone, "I have something that might help clarify the situation." He played the recording of Mr. Peterson's conversation with Mr. Williams in the hallway. The principal's expression grew more serious as she listened to the teacher's comments about diversity initiatives and his assumption that Damon didn't earn his place in advanced classes. When the recording finished, the office was completely silent. Mr. Peterson's face had gone pale, and he seemed to realize that his private comments had just become very public evidence. "Mr. Peterson," Principal Martinez said slowly, "this recording suggests that your treatment of Damon may have been influenced by factors other than his academic performance. Do you care to explain?" "That conversation was taken out of context," Mr. Peterson said quickly. "I was expressing frustration about administrative pressure to pass students who aren't meeting standards." "But sir," Damon interjected respectfully, "I demonstrated in class today that I understand the material better than most students. My academic performance isn't the issue here." Principal Martinez asked for more details about the classroom demonstration that had happened just before they came to her office. As Damon described how he had successfully explained complex physics concepts at the whiteboard, she took careful notes. "I'd like to see some examples of Damon's graded work," Principal Martinez said finally. Damon pulled out his folder of returned assignments and quizzes. Principal Martinez examined them carefully, comparing Damon's answers with the grade sheets and comments. She also looked at the extra credit work that Mr. Peterson had dismissed. "Mr. Peterson, this student's work appears to be mathematically correct and well explained. Can you help me understand the grading criteria that resulted in these low marks?" Mr. Peterson struggled to provide satisfactory explanations. His comments about unclear reasoning and insufficient understanding didn't match the quality of work that Principal Martinez was seeing. "I'm going to need to involve Dr. Chen from our district office," Principal Martinez said finally. Dr. Chen was the district's curriculum specialist for science and mathematics. "This situation requires a formal review." Over the next week, a thorough investigation took place. Dr. Chen interviewed other students in the physics class, reviewed all of Damon's assignments, and observed Mr. Peterson teaching. The findings were clear and damning. Multiple students confirmed that Damon was treated differently than his classmates. His academic work was consistently graded more harshly than equivalent work from other students. And Mr. Peterson's comments about Damon's abilities were contradicted by the student's actual performance. Dr. Chen also discovered that this wasn't an isolated incident. 2 other minority students had transferred out of Mr. Peterson's advanced classes in previous years, citing similar treatment. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. The resolution came swift and decisive. Mr. Peterson was suspended pending a formal disciplinary hearing. He was required to attend extensive bias training before being allowed to return to teaching. His grading of Damon's work was reviewed and corrected, bringing Damon's grade in the class up to the A. It should have been all along. But the most important change came in the weeks following the investigation. Word of what had happened spread through the school, and several other students came forward with their own stories of unfair treatment in various classes. The administration implemented new policies for addressing discrimination complaints and created a student advocacy program. Damon found himself in an unexpected role as a student leader. Classmates who had witnessed his confrontation with Mr. Peterson began asking him for advice about their own academic challenges. Teachers started paying more attention to potential bias in their grading practices. The group project situation was also resolved. Damon was moved to one of the advanced groups where his contributions were immediately valued and respected. His research on electromagnetic wave applications became the foundation for a presentation that won the school's science fair. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in Damon himself. The experience had taught him that sometimes working harder isn't enough. Sometimes you have to stand up and demand fair treatment, even when it's uncomfortable and scary. 3 months later, Damon received acceptance letters from several top engineering programs, including MIT and Stanford. His physics grade was now accurately reflecting his abilities, and his teacher recommendations praised his courage and leadership as much as his academic talents. At graduation, Principal Martinez made a special mention of students who had shown exceptional character during their time at Riverside High. She didn't name names, but everyone in the auditorium knew she was talking about Damon when she described a student who had demonstrated that true academic excellence includes not just mastering the material, but having the courage to stand up for what's right. Damon's mom cried during that speech, thinking about all the late nights of studying and all the times her son had doubted himself. She was proud of his grades and his college acceptances, but she was even prouder of the young man he had become. The recording on Damon's phone had changed everything, not just for him but for every student who would come after him. Sometimes the most important lessons happen outside the textbook, and sometimes the most crucial equations have nothing to do with physics. They have to do with justice, courage, and the simple but powerful idea that every student deserves to be judged by their abilities, not by someone else's assumptions about who they are or where they belong.